Hey, everybody. My name is Shannon Howard, and I'm based in Black Mountain, North Carolina, just outside of Asheville. I'm the Director of Customer and Content Marketing here at Intellum and very excited that you are joining us today for Underscore. This is a monthly webinar series that we host for the customer education community so you can hear from other people in the industry about what they're doing on topics that are relevant and that matter to us today. And so today we're talking about a very important topic, which is on cross-functional collaboration. So our roles are really dependent on cross-functional collaboration. And if we do it well, we knock it out of the park. If we can't do it well, maybe our results suffer a little bit. And so I'm very excited to have some folks on the call today to speak about their experiences building those cross-functional relationships. I'm going to go to our next slide here so you can see what we're going to talk about. In the meantime, before I introduce our guest, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself. So go ahead in the chat, make sure you're messaging everyone. I think the default is hosts and panelists, and just let us know, who are you, what do you do, and where are you calling in from? And we'll say hello in the chat. A little quick overview of what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about how best to partner with other teams. So we're going to talk about which teams, other customer education teams they're collaborating with, right? Because it's a little bit different depending on what your MO is, right? And then how to best collaborate with those other teams, or their best practices or their cadences that tend to work across the board. And then the last part is how to overcome common obstacles. I don't know about you. I feel like cross-functional collaboration should be easy because we're people and we should just work together. But it's not always that easy for different reasons, whether we have competing priorities or the business doesn't have cadences for cross-functional collaborations. We're going to talk about that and then how each person on our panel has overcome some of those obstacles. I'm going to let each panelist introduce themselves. They're on the screen here. But Mandy, if you want to kick us off.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey everyone, my name is Mandy Patterson. Pronouns are she, her, and I am the manager of customer education at Sprout Social, based in the suburbs of Chicago. So we're finally starting to ease into that warmer weather and some sunshine, which is great. We're out of the Chicago winter winter blues here, so that's a big plus. But super excited to be here today and chatting about all things cross collaboration.
And Jamie.
Awesome. Hey, everyone. Happy to be here. My name is Jamie Netzer, also pronouns she, her, and I'm the product marketer for community and learning at Atlassian. So I told the crew before we just started on this call that I feel like a little bit of an interloper today because I am a marketer for customer education rather than an explicit customer education pro. So it is my job always to think about how we can get more eyeballs on our customer education content. And our team, we were going to talk a little bit about where our teams sit. I'm at Atlassian, and just recently the customer education team actually merged with our community team, and that team sits on the marketing team. So that's where we are sort of within the organization. Happy to be here.
And Nick.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for allowing me to hop in here. My name is Nick Hershey. I'm Customer Education Manager at Energage, based just outside of Philadelphia. So my experience with education, it's been a lot of building from the ground up, getting it out there for people to see, the content, articles, things like that. So yeah, we had a lot of collaboration that we're working with, excited to talk about it. And as far as where education sits in our world, we sit with the customer success side of things here at Engage.
And Mandy, did you want to add where y'all sit? Because yours is
Yeah,
interesting too.
thank you. Thanks, Jamie. So our customer education team sits within our overall customer marketing team. So we're a part of the larger product and customer marketing organization at Sprout. So also similar to Nick, kind of have started to build the practice from the ground up, and then similar to Jamie, have that much of that marketing focus as well too.
Awesome. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And if folks in the chat, you want to just include maybe where your team sits, feel free. But we're going to actually move into our questions here. And I should say, you are welcome to ask questions. So if you have questions for our panelists as they come up, there's a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to put it there. That helps us keep track. But we're going to start first. And Mandy, I'll have you answer this question first. Who are the primary stakeholders for your customer education program, and how do you collaborate with them to kind of understand their needs and how your team can meet those needs?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the biggest stakeholders for us, it really depends on what we're creating and who we're creating it for. But I would say the folks that I work with the most often are going to be my product marketing team, very, very close with them, our revenue enablement team as well. outside of kind of our larger product and customer marketing team, I'm partnering a lot with our product managers, our CS leaders, and then also support leaders as well. So really kind of depends on what we are working on, but those are usually, I would say, if I had to pick like two that I'm really want to have like their blessing on the customer ed that we create, it's my product marketing team and then my product team, just making sure that we've got a good mix of what is the messaging that we're trying to put out into the space, but also making sure that we've captured the proper like business use cases from our users on the product side as well.
And Nick, what about for your customer education team? Which teams do you most closely collaborate with?
Yeah, so when we first started out with the prospect of creating education, it was a lot of working with support. We were pulling information from them to see how can we educate customers as well as internal folks when things were going to support that maybe didn't really need to go there. So that's kind of where we started. We still work with support currently, but we've since expanded to different areas of our product team and as well as our marketing team, just to help create customer-facing collateral. Product is super helpful when it comes to updating us on upcoming changes. We've really built relationships there in order to make that better. Because in the past, it was product would release something and we sort of have to play catch up in order to get that information out into our help center. Now we have plans, we have meetings that are a little bit more regular, so we're more on top of things there. So that's a huge one as well.
That's awesome. I think we can all relate to the product being tossed over the wall and then playing some catch up so that you've got a way to integrate. And then Jamie, how about for you? How do you collaborate with your customer education team?
Yeah. So yes, Nick, definitely. First off, I think one thing that I didn't mention earlier is that, Atlassian is a pretty big company and we've been around for 20 years. Customer education department has been around since 2015. Community team has been around for at least a decade. So definitely not the same vibes of starting small and building scrappy. It's that's more of that, like trying to take a tank and turn it slowly but surely. So you may or may not be surprised that we, our customer ed team suffers from some of the same stuff of the product of, the product team just now starting to get more in that cadence of instead of footballing something over the fact. And I think that's one of the main things that I think about too, from a marketing perspective, right? So if I'm that glue between the customer education team and the rest of the marketing team, that's the other thing that we've just recently sort of really started to provide some process around, is the same thing. Instead of the customer education team making a piece of content and then having it be completely wrapped and done, and then taking it to the marketing team and saying, how can you use this? I tried to do that for like a year and it didn't always work as well. So finally, at some point, I was like, oh, okay, I think the idea here is to get into that cadence of marketing planning and see, okay, what kind of resources might we be able to create? And it's hard, right? Because you don't want your customer education team to just be a straight up shared service that's only, right? We don't only exist to be put into marketing campaigns, but at the same time, I think there can be some like back and forth there that can help a lot. So yeah, my primary stakeholder, I would say, really is the customer education team. Like as a product marketer, I'm ideally in their strategic conversations and helping shape the product as well as that product's go-to-market story, which means I have to have super strong partnerships with our learning team, our certification team, the product team that makes the digital homes. Like, we're thinking learning. This is one of the changes that has happened in the couple of years that I've been at Atlassian, is thinking of learning content as a product. Like if I'm a product marketer, that is the product I'm selling. And so I'm also in touch with the teams who are making the digital homes for our training and certifications. But aside from that, like I said, Atlassian sits within the community team. So we work with that community team a ton, even before we merged as one team, because the folks in our community are often the people who are going to be super active and interested in training and certification too. There's a heavy overlap there. And then some of the other teams that y'all have mentioned too, our customer success team, our sales team. Atlassian is big enough that there's a specific group of people who are brought into sales deals when the word training is mentioned. So that group of people is important to me. And but then teams like our digital customer success team, we also have a team, the metaphor they use is if you have a named CSM, it's like a doctor. This team, it has a very one-to-many. It's more like taking a vitamin. So they're sending out via email resources that might be helpful for folks in terms of customer success. Our training has a really important place there. So those are some of the teams that I end up working with as that bridge.
And I think something that is maybe interesting is that for each of you, who you're working with is kind of dependent on maybe different aspects, whether it's content development, which I know Mandy and Nick, your teams are working on that content development. So there's collaboration for that part. And then there's also collaboration in the marketing and promotion of our learning content. How are we actually getting this to learners at the right time? So maybe we'll start on kind of the content side. And Nick, maybe if you want to start, you mentioned support and you mentioned product. How are you working with them and collaborating with them to support the work that they're doing and maybe even partner with them on the content creation process?
Yeah, certainly. So one of the very first metrics we started using when we launched our help center was how are we helping support cases. So as I mentioned, some of those support cases that were coming in that didn't really need to go to support, are they reducing so that way support has time to handle the bigger cases and that sort of thing. So yeah, so basically we're still working with them. We meet with them once a month. We have a monthly meeting where we review some recent cases and say, they bring us a report and say, here's what we're spending a lot of time on. How can we educate customers? How can we educate internal folks? So we have that going as well. And then we have monthly meetings as well with other areas of our products. So whether it's UX, developers, things like that, just to keep us up to date on what's coming down the pike for product changes. Because right now our software, our platform is changing a ton, which is awesome, but can be really hard to keep up with. So these meetings are super helpful with that. And we've gotten into such a good flow with that, where sometimes someone from product will just reach out to me on Slack directly and say, hey, this thing is coming. Here's what it is. Just a real quick, maybe minor change, but still important enough to educate people on. So it's gotten to the point where it's not me constantly reaching out anymore. It's them coming to me, as well as, again, those monthly meetings, which are super helpful.
That's awesome. If I can ask a follow-up question on the monthly meeting, it sounds like that didn't exist before, right? You were kind of getting that toss over the wall. How did you, or you and Jill, how did you implement those meetings and kind of get earlier, maybe we'll say upstream of the product release process?
Yeah, so part of it too was having we have a senior leader of our customer success team who was very proactive in helping us get education going. That was super helpful too in getting other teams involved, because we definitely hit roadblocks with, with product and with changes. They're prioritized on getting those changes rolled out, those updates rolled out, bugs come up, that sort of thing. So talking with education or spending time working with education wasn't always high on their priority list. But now that we've had it for a while, we've been able to collect metrics and data, and they realize, hey, this is helpful. We're collecting metrics on how help center reviews affect retention, things like that. So they're seeing the value now to the point where it's a two-way street as far as communicating goes.
You just hit on some of my favorite topics around executive sponsorship, and then also being able to prove the value of what you're doing. That makes, and I love that your product team is now coming to you instead of kind of trying to insert yourself. All right, so Mandy, your turn on the content creation process. How does your team collaborate with other teams? What does that partnership look like?
Yeah, so kind of similar, Nick, to what you touched on, having like those monthly meetings. I think our customer ed has started to get baked into more of our processes. So if we are coming up on an early access or a beta, we have a kickoff for that. I get a seat at the table. We get to talk through like, okay, what are we looking for in that beta guide? What do we need to educate customers on at this point, right? Because it's a little bit different once we get something out there to GA. We also have, this came through partnership with product marketing. So I'm probably going to like praise my product marketing team like quite a bit, because they are just such great collaborators and really saw the value that customer ed brought, I mean, right away. But we have monthly meetings with PMs from our different zones. So they'll go through and answer questions from like our SE team. So while a little bit of that is relevant for what I'm doing, or might unlock some things where I could say, oh, we're missing this in the help center, like, oh, this would be really great for an e-learning course down the road, we also get previews of kind of what's coming. So that's how I try to keep my keep my ear to the ground, if you will, just to hear like, okay, what are the things that are going on. We also have an internal process that we started where we get requests that come in through we're using Asana for overall like management. So we get those requests that come in from our PMs that'll say like, hey, got this product update coming. They fill out a little bit of a brief, which is great. It also helps us to streamline in marketing because we're all using Asana. So I can share those things out with other stakeholders and teams that might need insight there. But that process has gone really great. Otherwise, I think we still have a little bit of the habit of a little over the wall here and there, which is to be expected, especially when there's, a way to achieve that low hanging fruit and like some quick wins for customers. So what's been great about that is we have a dedicated product ops team that has worked really hard to bake in even more process, which I'm sure everyone is just loving. But a lot of that process too, we have an automated Slack channel that'll pop up and we get a heads up to say like, hey, we don't know specifically, but sometime in the next couple of weeks, this feature is going to go out, and our PMs write these beautiful internal feature pages where I can start to pull info from. I know what plan level it's going to, so it gives me all of the context, and then it makes for much more informed and efficient conversations when I do need to meet with the PM, product marketing, whomever, to be able to say like, okay, here's all the context that we have. What's missing? What do we need? What type of format is this product update going to be, especially appropriate for? So I think as customer ed is getting more of a spotlight put on it, I think there's definitely going to be more and more of that process kind of coming to light. But right now there's a few different inputs, but I think it's also kind of great to have that because you're getting that different perspective. Like, not only do I have kind of the customer insight, but I know what's important to product. I know what's important to product marketing. I know what Sprout is scaling as a higher tier release. I know what we're scaling as a lower tier release, and how might that change the way that we seek to educate on it.
I love that. I love the just close collaboration, and even building that into process or that automated, right? Because you can't always, in a dream world, we have a good heads up. We're able to put things into our plans. But especially if you work for a software company, a SaaS company, you got to get ready for, some more last minute requests. And I love that your team has found a way to be flexible to that. Okay, so there's the content creation side, right? We talk a lot about this and a lot of different avenues. Then there's the marketing and promotion side. This is my love, because you can build it. They won't come. We've talked about this for years. We got to market our content to people. We have to market our learning. We have to reach people where they're at. It's not just marketing, but it's also collaboration with those other teams. And so how are we getting eyeballs on our learning content, or people registered for training? And so Jamie, I'll have you kick us off in terms of how do you think about marketing and promoting, and how do you collaborate with your education team to make sure that learning content is reaching the right people at the right time?
Yeah, it's really awesome to hear the parallels between the content creation side and then the marketing and promo side. So like, I feel like I have a big +1 to our process on getting more eyeballs. Often looks like a lot like what Nick described, of there's a recurring meeting, right? Where and it's funny because we have a course, Atlassian University has a great course on how to run effective meetings, which is free. And also share it in here because it really is lovely. And a significant part of that is like, don't have meetings if you don't need them. But there is something about that, when you're in that cross-functional, you're trying to find that shared goal, you're trying to work across teams. There's something about having that set, like, oh yeah, I'm going to be talking to those people again soon, that makes sure that you're sort of on your toes in a way that if that cadence isn't there, it can just kind of fall off. It can be like, yeah, we'd love to incorporate your stuff. And then, crickets. So that's definitely one thing that I have taken advantage of, is that kind of cadence with teams. And then I have found that cadence with teams then turn into exactly the other thing that Nick mentioned, which is then sometimes once you start to sort of build that drum of folks knowing that they can come to you, then ideally you're more baked in the process from the front end. So from a marketing perspective, part of what this looked like for us was relatively recently, Atlassian sort of made some updates into how the marketing team, the broader marketing team, was doing their planning. And that involved establishing a shared, like Mandy was saying, a shared template. So it's like, for every single big programmatic campaign, here's the template that you're going to fill out. Well, community and university are now boxes on that template, right? So every single time a marketer goes to be like, what might I need for this campaign? They have the option at least to reach out to us and be like, is there a course that might fit into this campaign? So that's one way that we've found some success. Although to be honest, that's still new. And I'm really grateful to hear the point about executive sponsorship, because I think if I'm guilty of anything, it's definitely working at the ground level and like making friends with everybody and being like, yeah, let's stay in touch and let's do it. However, sometimes that executive, that top down, like I'm taking notes about our CSM team, like the digital CSM team are buds, but we have CSMs with named accounts. And I do need to go back to their boss and say, how can we actually help you? And so that's the other thing that I'll say, like broadly in terms of working together from a marketing perspective. I think being a marketer speaking for the customer ed team is helpful because I have just that basic sense of what works and what doesn't in marketing. And marketing is not rocket science. All of us are marketed to all the time. We have a basic understanding, but you may not know that, for example, more than one CTA is most often a bad thing, right? So our customer ed team would occasionally be like, well, can't we be, couldn't we be in this campaign? I know that a team currently focused on upselling a customer has no business throwing in an on-demand course that they would expect one of our customers that's paid. Like they're not going to ask somebody to pay for something. However, there are sweet spots where your goals actually overlap. So in the case of our events team, that's one place over the past couple of years where I've really leaned in. We have a big customer summit every year in Las Vegas. We also, as a part of that, offered, last year it was training. This year we're doing certification for the first time in several years at Team 24 in Las Vegas. That's one of those rare and beautiful times where someone might literally be more likely to come to the conference if they could also add on training or certification to their experience. And so that's like maybe sort of the baseline is like making sure that you actually have a shared goal and that you can provide them something with your customer education content that couldn't be filled by another resource. And I'm curious, Mandy and Nick, about how much of your customer education offerings are paid versus not, because that's the big trick, right? Is like if you're asking somebody to help you sell something, that's different than providing somebody. Like I keep repeating to my team that learning content is the best content marketing you could possibly have, right? If it's free. If it's paid, that's where it gets a little tougher.
So I'm hearing you say, Jamie, one is kind of establishing a cadence, and it sounds like you all have a cadence of connecting with people who are kind of informing the content and then also probably promoting the content. And then also, kind of top down, making sure there's executive level buy-in, and you have relationships with those executives who can kind of share with their team what you're doing or what the expectations are. But I like too that you're talking on the ground level. So an old boss of mine taught me I think the concept's called Nemawashi. It's you're getting this ground level buy-in so that when you go upward in the organization, it's like, oh, we're already all on the same page. And so there's value to that bottoms up as well. But Nick, I'll toss it over to you to talk about how do you collaborate with other teams to socialize and promote your learning content?
Yeah, certainly. So Jamie, just kind of answer your question real quick too. Our education is included. We don't have anything set up where there's no charge. So anyone can go in and search any of the FAQs, how to, that sort of education that we have, best practices. We do a lot of work too with our CSMs, where now that we know how much the help center impacts retention, which is a KPI that we're measuring for 2024, is retention with help center views and that sort of thing. Now that we kind of have a baseline for that, we encourage the CSMs to always bring the help center up when they're talking to their customers, when they're on an advising session call. Specifically, when it's something that's related to what the customer is going through, what the conversation's about, that helps get the customer in there and shows them, hey, there's this valuable resource for you. Here it is. We integrate with Pendo. So we use data from Pendo to see how people are clicking into our help center through the platform. So we use data that way too to help determine, hey, this tooltip that we have, a lot of people are clicking into it. That means it's working great. This onboarding guide that we have, not a lot of people are clicking into the help center stuff that we have. Maybe we need to reword it or put something else in there. But yeah, then as far as sharing it out too, we encourage CSMs in their follow-up emails to put help center links related to the conversation there. Every 2 weeks in our company Slack channel, I send out a blast that shows, hey, here's some updates in the help center, some new things, new content that people might find useful that they can then share out as well. So it's just sort of become part of the conversation with customers that the help center is there to them, where they can go and dive a little deeper into really whatever topic they're interested in.
And you mentioned you're working with your support team and encouraging them to share things in the help center and kind of, because we have to train customers, right? Not just training, but how do we train them to go to our help center, to go to our online academy? When you were talking with your support team, how did you get them up to speed on sharing out that education content and how they could find the right content to share with customers?
Yeah, certainly. And that was part of I guess, a bump in the road, so to speak, when we first launched the help center was, previously, if someone internally had a question, it was send it to a Slack in our support channel Slack, and then someone responds. But support was spending so much time responding to internal Slacks that it was taken away from the cases. So that's where, when we launched the help center, we went around to the teams, talked to them about the help center, showed them the search capabilities, and to think like a customer too, because a lot of the content that we have in the help center, we want to use words that customers are going to use and not internal lingo. So we had to help kind of train folks internally around that to get used to that as well. And one of the things I think that really helped was, if someone had trouble finding something, they could reach out and we would ask, okay, what are you searching for? And then they'd say, okay, let's try this instead because this is the terminology that's in our platform or that the customer would use. So that was a long process, but we've gotten there pretty well, I think.
That's awesome. So it sounds like not even just customer enablement, but internal enablement too. 'Cause we all have to learn how to use our own platform.
Exactly.
Right.
And then that helped transfer to the customers when they're, on the phone with them for our customer facing teams.
Awesome. All right, Mandy, how about you? How do you collaborate? So you're in the customer marketing team. How do you collaborate maybe with the rest of your team to serve up the right content at the right time?
Yeah, I feel very, very lucky to work with some really incredible folks on our customer marketing team that are already, I don't need to like sell them on the vision of customer education, right? They're bought in, they're invested. So we have a really talented communications manager, and she is crazy thoughtful about what we put in front of our customers and how often we put it there. So she spun up like a customer newsletter function that we have, and there's always a spot for education in there, which I think is really great. Whether we're touting something in the help center, we do like a Sprout Solves It series that we partner with our support team on. So they take common requests, we write an article that's catered to them in their voice that goes into our help center, and then we'll tag that in there. But for larger initiatives, larger go-to-market plans, education gets baked into more of our announcement emails. It's something that I've worked with our CSM team to make sure that they have some enablement there, partnering again with our revenue enablement team to get links to courses into our outreach templates to make sure that everyone is kind of armed with the latest and greatest there. And even I think back to last summer, we relaunched our certification program, and I got really lucky that I got to partner with our social team. So we did some really cool stuff on social through Instagram stories to, we kind of did a take on like, oh, so you think you're a Sprout expert? Prove it. And use that as a really unique way, I think, to promote that certification program relaunching. So a lot of it gets pre-baked into our product marketing. We have like our tiered releases like I had talked about. So depending on kind of the higher tier, there's always going to be some sort of education play. Now we cover all tiers regardless, but it is really great, I think, to see more of that education kind of popping up in larger customer comms and really some of those announcements and kickoff emails to say like, hey, not only are we offering this great solution for you, but we also have the education to help back it up and get you prepared.
So Ashley had, I'm trying to get the Q&A open here. I had a question that ties in really well to that. So she said, when you're collaborating with product marketing, and so Mandy, you said there's some of your closest collaborators, and then Jamie, you are a product marketer.
Yep.
How do your teams define what falls under product marketing versus customer education? So there may be some overlap, but how does your team define where it starts, where it ends?
That is such a good question. As we talked about, as I touched on at the beginning, similar to Nick, I've kind of started to build customer ed from the ground up. So when I first joined Sprout, I joined as a tech writer. That's where my background is in technical writing. And at that point in time, product marketing owned all of our release notes. They owned all of the beta guides, and they were writing a lot of the how-to product content. So I was like, do y'all want to be doing that? Like, does that feel like a good use of your time? And they're like, I mean, it's part of the job. Like, but I don't think that it needs to be. So having those discussions with them and kind of understanding, like, what are your goals with this? Do you feel like this fits into your product marketing functions and, you know, things that you would normally do? I think having us like sit down and we kind of like, you know, this is back when we were still in an office. So we kind of whiteboarded things out to say, like, who should have ownership here, who needs to have ownership here, and we shifted that purview. So I took on release notes and getting those into the help center with supporting articles, again getting baked into that beta guide process. So the way that we at least have it divided up at Sprout is that our product marketing team, they are the ones that work even more closely with product than I do, but they're the ones that determine through all of the market research that they do, what kind of tier release is this? What is the size of the impact? They put together these really great message maps that we have with internal messaging, external messaging, how we're going to talk about this, elevator pitches. I mean, really go the mile for us to all understand, like, here's the message that, you know, we're going to go to market with this, and this is how it's going to be done. So they kind of run with all of that. Where customer ed comes in is I take that content, those message maps are like my North Star in addition to what I get from product, but I take those message maps and make sure that I'm incorporating that go-to-market messaging and what I'm putting together, again, with that a little bit of a different lens, but making sure that we're speaking the same language so that customer journey experience, regardless if you are prospect, current customer, however you're being marketed to about our product, I want you to feel the same way when you come to the education resources, that nothing's a surprise, or like, oh wait, to Nick's point, like, wording's a little bit different here, or I'm talking about this one way and it was talked about differently when it was, you know, when I first found out about the product. So I find that alignment with them through using those message maps. And then product marketing, I would say 99% of the time, reviews the content that I put together to say, oh, yep, cool, we're aligned here on messaging. You're like, how would you feel about tweaking this? We might have some back and forth, right? But I think at the end of the day, having that partnership between the two of us and knowing that, like, actually educating the customer on how to use something and what the benefits are, more so of like, here's how this is going to make your life easier, not so much like, here's your 1 to 10 steps on how to do this, right? That's kind of where we've drawn the line of, they own how we're going to talk about something externally and internally for that matter, and then I own how we're going to educate around those messages.
I like that you mentioned product marketing is providing you with the messaging maps, because I've thought about product marketing a lot, creating kind of the wrapper language, those overarching themes and messages that we want to communicate. And I think what's really important about that is it creates that cohesion that you're then kind of trusted to take your part because you are putting the wrapper around it, right? Sometimes if we're trying to take something from someone else, but we can't frame it the right way, you know, it's not cohesive from a brand perspective. All right, Jamie, what about for you? How do you think about product marketing versus
I feel like there's like two parts of this. One is the more the part that's closer to what Mandy's describing, which is like the rest of the product marketing team that has their own, products that they're pitching. And then there's me as the conduit. So I'll start with the piece that and say that it feels very familiar, what Mandy's describing in terms of that team articulating messaging based on, competitive insight, based on research, and then our customer ed team taking that messaging and putting that wrapper, like you just said, Shannon, because what's interesting is, like, I think often the core of the content is the same, can be the same, but it can feel like, to a marketer, it can feel like it doesn't fit if it's not in that wrapper of messaging, even though maybe you haven't even changed the core education content that much. So that's been a really nice strategy we've been using lately. So for example, we have a whole learning path focused on developer experience. But it turns out that developers don't actually care about developer experience. They care about flow and staying in the flow, right? Their bosses care about, right? So it depends on the persona you're talking to too. Their bosses care about the developer experience because they want to keep developers happy. So we have a learning path that's called supporting your flow state, right? That's absolutely because of our partnership with the product marketing team to get that messaging and that like targeting right. Then the other interesting thing that, again, size of Atlassian, company's been around longer, the existence of me means that I also get to partner. Again, if we go back to thinking of our education content as products, part of every single paid course that we release, so which are our certifications. We have some on-demand courses that are paid, some that are free, and then in instructor-led trainings, so in-person trainings. I'm getting together with the person who has come up with this product and brainstorming on the value prop, which goes back to, I think, Mandy, exactly the other thing you were saying, the like, what's in it for me? So here's what I can do with Jira, but how's it going to make my job easier? How's it going to make my life a little bit better? And so that's the other part of that's the part that I really like the most of my job, is partnering with that customer ed team to make sure that the value prop is articulated. And then that value prop lives in a message house that we then use to inform everything from the copy that's on the description page before you click through and actually get certified, to the whatever paid advertisements we might be sending out about it, to our own newsletters or inclusion in other newsletters. It becomes a little baby message house for our education content. So that's really nice too.
Awesome. All right. So Ashley, hopefully this has answered your question. Nick, I'll throw you a question before we move to kind of our last pre-planned question. And if folks who are online, you want to throw another question in the Q&A, feel free. So Versha had asked, how did you set up the process? So if your customers might use one terminology, internal folks use something different. How did you figure out what it was that your customers were saying and how they were searching?
Yeah, certainly. So the first thing that we try and do is use the language that's in the platform. So the customers in the platform, consistency is key, right? So if they see one word in the platform and they want to learn more about it, that's what they should be searching for. That's what we should have, in the title, in the body, that sort of thing. The other thing that we have, so our help center is run through Salesforce. I'm able to pull a report that shows what people are searching for and what they clicked on, or if they didn't click on anything at all. So every other week maybe, or once a month, I'll go through that report and just see, are people finding what they're looking for? Do we need to adjust the language or anything like that? And a lot of it too is just feedback. So as I said earlier, education here at Energage sits under the customer success team. So I communicate heavily with our customer success managers as well as our support team. So they can help provide feedback as to if customers are having trouble finding something, because customers will reach out to them directly as well. So, and then that feedback can get passed along. So, and then we have a help center dedicated Slack channel that people can submit if they're having any questions, finding anything for themselves or the customer as well.
Awesome. And I like that multifaceted. You're looking at the data. What are they searching for? What are they clicking on, not clicking on? Also getting that kind of more qualitative voice of customer in the Slack community. Right. So final question here, the juicy one, which is maybe let's start with just one. I'm sure there are many, but what's one kind of hurdle that you've had to overcome in that cross-functional collaboration, right? So for Mandy and Nick, you're kind of building from the ground up. So you're proving the value of your program, inserting yourself in with other teams. And then Jamie, you're kind of coming into this established team What's something that you've run into and what did you learn through that process? And Mandy, maybe we'll start with you.
Yeah, such a good question. I think so important. I think something I run into now is because I'm a part of our marketing team, is it within customer marketing. I'm a majority of what I'm going after, my OKRs, my KPIs, everything is tied to like larger marketing goals. When I'm partnering with support, CS, product, my goals don't align with theirs. Their priorities are different than mine. What might need to be expedited for our CS team doesn't necessarily need to be expedited for me, and vice versa. If there's something that I'm like, I have to get this done, this is really important, we have to get it out to customers. Just because it's a top level priority for me does not mean that it's a top level priority for my collaborators across the organization. And running into that, I think sometimes causes us to butt heads a little bit of like, well, this is important to me. Why can't they understand that this is important to me? And they're like, well, I have other priorities and this isn't important to me. So that poses challenges in and of itself. But I think a lot of what I've learned and what has led to success is how can we partner together for mutual success? Is there a goal of my support team that I can tie into? If they are looking, hey, we are trying to find more ways to have ticket reduction or deflection for that matter. We need better ways to deflect. Is there a way that I can create something in Help Center that maybe helps to stretch my goal a little bit, but it will also help them with the deflection? If we have, CS working with our unnamed book and they're struggling to adopt a feature, can I put something together in our learning portal that's an e-learning course that is going to help increase that customer adoption and kind of give them a break from doing more outreach, re-onboarding and reestablishing? So I try to find ways that I can sweeten the pot across both teams and say like, okay, let me devote some time to like helping you solve this issue, and in return, and you then help me solve this issue, whether it's I need data, I need insight, I need your expertise to, be that instructor voice that we might be missing otherwise. So I think a lot of what it comes down to outside of that is also just like having those personal relationships with the folks that you're working with and understanding like their working styles of what is important to them. I try really hard to get myself in other people's shoes because it helps me kind of remove myself from my sense of urgency and expediency and like, oh, it's my thing, it's my thing. And if I can kind of put that down for a minute, take a step back and say like, what are the factors that are influencing someone on my CS team, someone on my support team? What is coming at them from all these different directions? Why should they care that I have, a customer marketing goal to get this many registrations for an e-learning course that I just launched? Why do they care? Why should they care? Maybe they don't, or maybe they're not sold on the benefit. It's totally okay. I think the best part of it is getting to find that like commonality and that common understanding. And then once you have built that muscle and built that relationship, you look forward to partnering with those people because you know how they work, you know how they think, you've taken their circumstances into consideration. So you just get better and better and more efficient as the two of you form teams and start to work together more. So for me, my long-winded way of saying, taking a step back, kind of identifying, is there any mutual success that we can reach for together as a team? And what can I give back in order to, get better partnership in the long run?
I was taking some notes while you were talking, and it sounded like finding that mutual point of collaboration, that and then give and take, right? That sometimes we do something that maybe is not as high priority for us, but it's high priority for them because then they will do the same in return. And then also that just relationship building part, which Jamie, you mentioned with in the chat. So I'm going to pass it off to you because that's kind of a natural next step there.
Yeah, sure. And I really don't feel like I have too much to add to what Mandy said because it's so good and it was so clearly, and this chat conversation too, like I'm going to bring up what Ashley is saying about aligning on a company goal as well as a team goal. Like the dream is that you have actual OKRs that ladder all the way up so that you're working toward the same thing. I think we all know that the reality is that, and then I loved Jill added, like, if you have data behind a company goal, like retention, and then you can show that education makes an impact, like it does make it so much easier. I think I just really appreciated what Mandy said about, about the reality of remembering that we're all people and that we all have our own motivations and our own emotions. And so that's where this thought of WIFM, it's like short for what's in it for me, and keeping that in mind as a way to approach an internal stakeholder or potential partner instead of just like, sort of charging in and asking for something is, I think, super smart. I think as much as we may understand a bottom line, in my experience, even some of those goals like retention, even if you can have really great data, it's most often correlative data in my experience. And there are other people also saying that they're helping towards retention, or right. And so in the absence of like literally being able to prove that it is just this one perfect course that, caused this customer to stay with us, that's why I think you have to go to the people stuff, the basics of like treating someone with empathy. And honestly, like, and this is going to sound so, I don't know, like childish, but like, I prefer to make friends with people. I prefer to like actually know someone as a human being. And then I feel bad about letting them down and vice versa. And like, I feel like that's just as important as the on paper, metrics pieces.
It's a good, I think, reminder, and I think the chat sounds off here as well. Just marketing is internal and external.
There it
right?
is. Exactly.
We do want to promote, obviously, our content, our learning content, education opportunities to customers, but we need to do that internally as well. All right, Nick, what about for you? An obstacle, hurdle to cross-functional collaboration that you've run into? How did you overcome that?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, when we first started the help center, a lot of the focus was on working with support. And then from there, it was trying to branch into product. And that was the tough roadblock, the tough integration there to get them on board with our help center, with our education efforts, until we were able to say, hey, look at this data, look at these metrics. We're reducing support cases, and now we're measuring retention. And when we bring our retention numbers to folks on the product side, and they see them and say, oh, okay, this is, retention is a company thing, like Jamie was talking about. There's a lot of things that go into retention, but here's a piece of that where we can work together in product, in education, to help improve that. When we first launched our help center and we put links into our platform, we had maybe, I don't know, 10, 20 access points into our help center from our platform. Now we're probably close to 60 or 70. And a lot of that is in collaboration with product and getting them on board. So it's awesome to have those folks excited about this as much as, we're excited with where they're taking the product and the improvements they're making too.
I love that you're giving them so many. That actually stood out to me earlier when you were talking about those in-app modals and using that to link to your help center of meeting learners where they're at and then providing them those different entry points so they don't have to figure out, wait, where do I go for the help center again? Is it support.energage.com? Was it help.energage.com? That's awesome. Kim just asked kind of a follow-up question. How long did it take to be able to show support ticket deflection? Is it possible to do in 90 to 180 days, or did it take years?
So for us, we were measuring it quarterly. And then once we kind of narrowed down the process a little bit better, kind of fine-tuned things, yeah, we were measuring it kind of on a monthly, quarterly basis there, and then seeing improvements in those case deflections. So you always have to just start somewhere. But once we started promoting and being loud about the help center to other folks, internally, to get them to talk to their customers about it, because a lot of the cases too that were coming in were from internal folks, on behalf of their customers, where if that AM or AE had a place to go where they could look it up themselves, then they could answer that for the customer, and that makes them look better because then they don't have to get support involved. So it was a little bit of a process in training folks on how to use the help center internally as well. But yeah, we definitely saw some improvements, the farther we got along there.
It's interesting how some things, a lot of our metrics are more of those leading metrics, earlier stage metrics where we can show enrollments, completions, engagement rates, and it will take a little bit more time to prove something like retention or support ticket deflection. 2 more questions in the chat, and then we'll wrap up. So Amanda had asked about, okay, let's say you don't have a customer education team yet, right? I'm convinced most companies are doing it, and often it's piecemeal, right? You have your product marketing team creating release notes, support, maybe creating help articles, different people, CSMs offering training. If you were pitching this idea to executives, and you may have done this before, what would the top ideas be that you would present in that conversation?
Such a good question, and something I did fairly recently. So this is top of mind for me. I think as someone in customer education, knowing your audience is key. So that's where I would start. What is important to them? I don't think there's a bucket to say like, hey, these top things are the ideas that you should present. What's important to your stakeholders? For me, it was data. What data points can I point to? And lo and behold, Intellum, Thought Industries all have really great resources with a ton of data points that I could just cite, and I didn't have to do the research myself. So that was great, even though, I did do some of my own research. It wasn't just that piece of it. But I think being able to point to those data points and just showing the impact that sophisticated sophisticated companies have on their customer retention, their customer health through really sophisticated customer education programming. So if you can look at other players that are in your space, people that are doing it really, really well, and I'm talking companies that have testimonials from customers saying like, oh my gosh, this, the courses that they offer are great. They've helped me to up-level my career. I think pointing to those things and showing the impact that dedicated focus on customer education can have. And when you have experts in seat that get to just focus on those things rather than wearing, 57 different hats of like, oh, I'll do a little bit of this here, a little bit of that over there, but really honing in, it moves the needle for the business. Customer education is a revenue generator. It's going to keep your customers retained. It's so much cheaper to retain a customer than go out and acquire new ones. You're going to be able to surface up more adoption, more growth. I think that point is maybe the one that I would always hit on, is like, this is a revenue generator for our company, and being able to point to those really specific examples of other people that are doing it really, really well, for some of those data points that are in Intellum's resources, in Thought Industries resources that you can point to. It's hard to argue with that. It's hard to argue with that if you don't have, as a stakeholder, if you don't already have that focus.
Nick, anything you would say from your perspective?
I think Mandy hit the nail on the head there for sure. Our whole thing is educated customers are happy customers. Happy customers, come back. So to me, it's kind of as simple as that, right? And one of the things too we've learned with our platform is employee engagement surveys. So there's a lot of data, a lot of numbers. It can be super overwhelming for people that don't know what they're looking at to get into our platform. So that's where we have all these education aspects, all these points where they could go into the help center to learn on their own. Because me personally, I like figuring things out for myself. I like learning myself if I can. I'll hop on a call with anyone to teach me things, but I like exploring and figuring out things out myself. And I think customers are pretty similar for the most part.
All right, we have one. Those are great answers. I've popped a link to the report in the chat, so go check that out. And then our last question here is, we've been talking about internal stakeholder collaboration buy-in. We also need that buy-in from our learners, right? To actually why does this matter? I have a job. I have other things to do with my life. Why should I do this training? Why should I engage with education? So anyone want to answer that question to kind of wrap us up?
I can start just by saying that's right back to the WIFM, right? That ideally on the front page of the training, you have articulated clearly what they're going to get out of it if they go through it. The other thing I would say that we've really leaned into, which you can see if you check out that effective meetings course, is having stuff that's on demand, that's interactive, that's quick, that can be easily digested, just being aware of time and that it might be easier to get someone, like you said, like Nick, if you're interested in just finding out the answers yourself, we want to actually have some ability to tailor to someone's learning archetype at a given moment. Either just give them the answer and support documentation, don't hesitate to do that, or also present the answer in a more interactive way if that's the learning hat that folks want to put on.
I like that you mentioned time, because I feel like a lot of people are talking about micro learning. And I remember kind of building my first online learning center type thing. And one thing that we built into the cards for each learning activity was how long it would take. So that they would, because I think initially we think, oh, of course, like this is going to take me 30 minutes or an hour. And that just seems so not doable for a lot of people, depending on what you're trying to learn. So yeah, being able to kind of create those micro learning moments and then help people set appropriate expectations, right? If it's 30 minutes, probably more in depth. But if it's 2 minutes, maybe it's a point solution. Like you're going to learn this one thing that you really need to know to unblock yourself. Okay. Well, with that, we will kind of wrap up for this month's underscore. I popped a link in chat and for the next webinar. So if you can join us next month, here, I'll share my screen so you can see. There's a little image here. All right, so we're going to talk next month about creating a unified learning experience with our friend John Morgan. So he's a learning systems engineer and just talking about, we use all these different platforms, right? An average of roughly like 20 different platforms in support of our learner experience. How do we make that seamless and work really well for learners? So feel free to grab your seat for that. But Mandy, Nick, Jamie, thank you for joining us. This is great. It's definitely a super important topic. And I appreciate you all sharing not just like how you collaborate, but how even, I think it's really important to acknowledge it's not always easy as we would like for it to be. So to just share some of those experiences and what you've learned as well. All right.
Thanks so much for having us, Shannon. This was
Yes,
great.
thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah. All right. Bye, everybody. We'll see you next month.